When I was 13, I went on my first deer hunting trip with my grandpa and dad. They'd always talked about their adventures, and I was thrilled to finally join them. We headed to a remote part of Texas known for its dense woods and abundant wildlife. I was ready to bag my first deer and earn my place among the hunters in my family. We arrived at our campsite, a clearing deep in the forest, just before dusk. My dad and grandpa set up the tents while I gathered firewood. As night fell, we sat around the campfire. My dad told stories of other huntings and taught me one last shooting lesson before the action. The sounds of the forest were all around us. It was peaceful and a bit eerie at the same time. Later that night, we settled into our tents. I lay awake, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the woods. Just as I was about to drift off, a scream pierced the stillness. It was unlike anything I had ever heard. High-pitched, desperate, and blood-curdling. I shot up in my sleeping bag, feeling my heart pounding in my chest. My dad and grandpa were already out of their tents, flashlights in hand, scanning the darkness. "What was that?" I whispered. "Probably just a bobcat or a mountain lion," my grandpa said. "They can sound pretty terrifying at night." We didn't find anything unusual, but the scream left us all on edge. Eventually, we returned to our tents. Though sleep didn't come easily, I kept replaying the sound in my head, trying to convince myself it was just an animal. The next morning, after breakfast, we set off to our hunting spots. My grandpa and I managed to corner a javelina. We brought it back to camp, prepared the meat, and had a hearty meal. Eating the first javelina I had helped hunt was incredible. The satisfaction of knowing I had played a part in the hunt was the most delicious part. I was finally becoming part of a tradition that had been in my family for generations. In the afternoon, we headed back, hoping to find a deer. But as the sun began to set, the woods became strangely quiet. Then I heard it again. The scream. It was even louder and more terrifying. I gripped my rifle tightly and started scanning the forest below. That's when I saw it moving between the trees. A figure. It was distorted, almost like a shadow, and it moved in a way that sent chills down my spine. Without thinking, I raised my rifle and fired. The sound of the gunshot echoed through the woods, and the figure seemed to vanish into thin air. My heart raced as I fired again and again, emptying my magazine into the darkness. The scream continued, seemingly unaffected by my bullets. It was then that I realized I was in over my head. I had no idea what I was dealing with. In a panic, I climbed down from my stand and ran towards our campsite. When I arrived, my dad and grandpa were already there. "Did you hear it?" I gasped, struggling to catch my breath. "Did you see it?" They nodded, their expressions grim. "We heard the scream and the shots," my dad said, "but we didn't see anything." We decided to pack up and leave immediately. The sense of unease was too strong to ignore. As we loaded the truck, the scream echoed through the woods once more, sending a final shiver down my spine. We drove away in silence, each of us lost in our own thoughts. Years have passed since that terrifying night, but the memory of the scream and the distorted figure still haunts me. I still hunt, but never alone. My dad and grandpa say it was probably just my imagination, a trick of the light and my overactive mind. But I know what I heard, and I know what I saw. Some things in the woods are better left undiscovered.